December 6, 1973. Olympia, Washington. The Capitol State Forest near the city had been drenched in several days of rainfall. After the heavy rains, forests usually smell fresh and mysterious, and at the same time, unravel new colors and secrets. Such a secret was uncovered in Margaret McKinney campgrounds, when a caretaker, while picking litter among the woods, discovered a mannequin, or just something that looked like one. It was a corpse of a young girl eroded away, showing signs of a wicked accident. The notorious Ted Bundy, who was wandering in the city at the time, became an immediate suspect. The body of Jane Doe showed every sign of an encounter with him. But was Bundy really her killer? Or was there more to ponder in the near-empty bag of evidence in this case? Let's today listen to the murder mystery of Washington's oldest cold case, the murder of Kathy Devine. In Seattle, Washington lived the Devine family. Bill and Sally Devine had two pretty girls, Sherry and Kathy. Kathy was born on Christmas Day, 1958. Being the youngest in the family, the girl had a free heart of a giver. Soft-souled, Kathy used to bring home any needy animal or kid and looked after them. The poetry-loving girl always told her parents that she wanted to be a preacher. Kathy was walking the early steps of adolescence. Like anyone of such age, she was also just a troubled teenager, wanting to explore herself. The pretty blue-gray-eyed blonde girl was having an issue with her boyfriend, a tough phase for any teenager. Kathy, on November 25, 1973, being stressed from an uneasy phase, wrote a leaving note for her family, and then left. She wrote, "I'll be back soon, Mom, don't worry." Mother Sally Ann Devine was convinced from the note that Kathy was going to meet her cousins in Oregon. But she didn't foresee the mode of transport Kathy planned to use. So how did she end up traveling to Oregon? Hitchhiking, which was quite common in the 70s. Kathy met her friends before leaving and told them about her plan to hitchhike all the way to Rockaway, Oregon, a 230-mile journey. As her friends watched, she hopped on the first pickup that stopped for her, and that was the last time Kathy was seen alive by her dear ones. The parents were informed by her friends that she went hitchhiking, and they knew she had made a big mistake. 2 days passed and there was no news of Kathy. Relatives and friends did not hear from the girl during these days. Father Bill Devine feared the worst when he got to know that Kathy had hitchhiked her way to Oregon. After 3 days, the family was sure of an unfortunate event. FIR was already registered and a search warrant was running through the city without much of a clue. On the 11th day, Kathy's elder sister, Sherry, saw Kathy's hand-decorated jeans on TV. News was showing details about a Jane Doe's dead body found around 80 miles southwest of Seattle, in Thurston County. It showed a rough hand-drawn sketch of a young girl, along with her clothing and jewelry. A dragon patch stitched near the pockets of the jeans found on the body shook Sherry, as she recognized it to be the favorite pants of Kathy, who had loved that dragon and had stitched it on by herself. The Devine family was shattered and had to swallow the deplorable news of losing their little Kathy. Catherine Devine, aka Kathy, was found dead at Margaret McKinney campgrounds near Thurston County, which was a 1.5-hour drive from Seattle. It was a famous spot for campers, but several days of rainfall had kept it relatively free. Barbara Salling, a caretaker at the park, saw the dead body of Kathy on the morning of December 6th. The corpse was so heavily compromised that one was incapable of looking at it without a gasp, implying it had been there for several days. Her chest had been cut with a sharp object by slicing through pockets of her jacket. Her throat appeared cut along with signs of strangulation, and her pants were torn from the waist to the area. Detectives from the Thurston County Sheriff's Department clearly observed the signs of a cruel assault and murder. They took into account tracks of a truck tire, a small rope, and a chain link bracelet. Post-mortem reports confirmed the presence of male fluid on the body, and also that the cut on the throat was the cause of her death. Police were unable to identify her as a citizen and suspected her as a hitchhiker. They ran news about her description and belongings in neighboring cities. Meanwhile, the Devine family had contacted the police, and the search for the cold-blooded murderer of Kathy Devine had started in Seattle, as well as Thurston County. The friends who last saw Kathy described a brown truck that picked her up from the North Street, but the appearance of the driver was unknown. For several days, a search was conducted in the city for a brown pickup, but it remained unsuccessful. Having little to nothing in clues, the case was on the verge of going cold, when Sergeant Paul Barclift from the county connected a few dots while analyzing the death report of Kathy. There had been an explosion incident in Thurston County on the night of the 25th of November, a truck explosion, which caught the interest of investigators. The truck belonged to William E. Cosden Jr., also known as Bill, a local truck driver who worked at Restover Truck Stop on Interstate 5 in Olympia, a half-hour drive from Thurston County. This point of interest became even stronger when Captain Mark Curtis, another detective on the case, got two anonymous tips while inquiring with truck drivers, who pointed fingers at William Cosden. This was enough for digging deeper into this guy's details. The background check unraveled that William Cosden had a history of violence and had just recently been released from an asylum after being treated for mental instability. The truckers' community was a group of tightly knit individuals when a matter of law arose, but Sergeant Paul Barclift managed to get a statement from one among them. He told the sergeant that he saw Cosden on the evening of the 25th, and his clothes were stained with blood. When he asked Cosden about it, he said he hunted and cooked a deer. Later that night, Cosden's truck burst into flames just 3 miles from the truck stop. When interrogated casually, Bill denied knowing anything about a girl. If he in fact was involved in the incident, the truck burning weakened the suspicion on William Cosden, as there was no evidence left that could be gathered to be used against him. Detectives were left with nowhere else to look. The cold-blooded murder of Catherine Devine went cold, but with a parallel realm of suspicion. All these incidents unfurled while there was also a wanted criminal roaming through Washington and Oregon, who the world would later infamously come to know by the name of Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was caught for the first time in 1975, but engineered dramatic escapes on several occasions. By now, the Thurston County Police Department, and especially the Devine family, were almost convinced that Kathy might have fallen prey to Bundy. All of Bundy's victims were found dead in almost similar manners. A few years passed, and in 1979, Ted Bundy was captured in Florida. He told the agencies about more than 30 killings of young women, including ones in Seattle where Kathy belonged. Various such cold cases were re-examined, with him as a suspect. He confessed to killing a hitchhiker in 1973 near Tumwater, which was a resting city near Olympia. But the details collected didn't match with the killing scene of Kathy. He denied having executed such an assault. Hence, Captain Mark Curtis refused to shut files on the case, and once also spoke his heart out that he could not get the murder of Kathy Devine out of his mind. In 1986, Mark Curtis acted on his intuition and managed to get a search warrant issued for William Cosden. Cosden, surprisingly, was at the McNeil Island prison at the time for charges of assault. Thurston County officials took samples of his blood, hair, and saliva, which in hindsight was a smart step during the long wait for advancements in DNA sciences. Mark Curtis and the department were confident in the evolving technologies of DNA. He supervised the murder case of Catherine until his retirement. Finally, by the dawn of the 21st century, DNA technology had made significant advancements. In 2001, the Crime Lab of Washington was capable of creating DNA profiling. Jeremy Sanderson, the forensic scientist from Washington, created a full genetic profile based on the male fluid recovered from the body of Kathy and ran it through the combined online DNA database of the state. But the results came out null, matching with no one else. As a part of being absolutely sure about Cosden, the team randomly decided to run his blood sample collected in 1986. This time, the results came out unequivocal. The DNA from the blood sample matched with the genetic profile created. William Cosden was the man behind Kathy's assault. Forensic scientists stated that the probability of selecting someone at random, and it turned out to be a matching profile with a male fluid sample, was 1 in a trillion. Now, the matched profile using the fluid samples proved that Cosden forcefully assaulted Kathy, but it did not prove that he killed her. It was time for the detectives to have a chat with Cosden. Still in prison for an assault committed in 1976, Cosden this time was cornered by the detectives with a 1 in a trillion possibility weighing against him for being the assaulter of Kathy. Cosden finally confessed that he had violated Kathy forcefully, but he refused to admit that he killed her. The investigation again got stuck at this point. The only option left for the detectives was to locate and interview some workers at Restover Truck Stop. After 28 years, some of the workers thankfully were still alive, and one of them became the final nail in the coffin of William Cosden. A man named David Pershone narrated the scene his eye captured on the evening of November 25, 1973.
Seen that sleeping bag was all bloody, and then I seen that brown waffle stomper shoe. It had some kind of dark laces in it.
David described a blood-soaked sleeping bag and a waffle stomper boot he saw at the back of Cosden's truck, the one boot that had been missing from the scene when Kathy's body was found. The match of shoe description brought the circle to a completion, revolving around William Cosden, despite what he or his attorneys said. William Cosden Jr., aka Bill, age 55, had a history of violent behavior from an early age. Born in Seattle, he passed Green Mills High School in 1964, after which he served as a U.S. Marine in Vietnam, from where Cosden was sent back home to America. The reason behind sending him back was his mental state. Officials stated that Cosden had several untreated and significant mental issues. His behavior proved to be abnormal from time to time. In April 1967, he was in Florida, where he picked up a woman named Helen Patricia Pilkington in a bar and murdered her by thrashing her with a frying pan. Cosden wasn't charged for it, as he pleaded not guilty based on his proven record of mental instability, but got admitted to an asylum for 6 to 7 years. Released in 1973 with a positive response, Cosden moved to northwest of Washington to the city of Olympia, where his father owned a business, the Restover Truck Stop. It was a spot for truckers to refill and hitchhikers to find their next hitch. Cosden took a job at the truck stop and started working as a truck driver, living a normal life. William was left open in society, and his violent nature again surfaced. when a self-searching girl from Seattle asked him for a ride. After the investigation reached the finish line in 2001, Sheriff Gary Edwards and Thurston County's chief criminal prosecutor were positive that although the case presented a few challenges, it was still rock solid. Having the witnesses and the DNA matchings in hand, one of the top arguments in the trial was the circumstantial evidence which connected all the dots leading towards Bill. Surprisingly, all the hustle by the department was never brought to notice of Kathy's family. After nearly 28 years, the Devine family was called again to court, where they finally saw the real killer of Kathy. They had no idea the investigation was still in progress. Although the family was told that a suspect was in surveillance, they always believed it was Ted Bundy, and had made peace with it during all those years. On March 8, 2002, William Cosden finally got charged for the assault and murder of Kathy Devine. On July 29, 2002, after having been in prison for 48 years since 1976 for first-degree assault, William Cosden was again sentenced to life in prison. The case highlights the admirable accomplishments in the advancements of forensic sciences. Sheriff Gary Edwards stated after the trials that DNA evidence became crucial to the case. The persistence, patience, and hard work of all the officers like Mark Curtis, who dedicatedly worked on this case, finally unraveled the real killer, which had little to nothing as evidence to start with. The cold case of Kathy Devine became the oldest cold case in Washington to be solved with DNA sciences.